A while back, I made a poll and asked which character arc you have found the most complex in Season 2. 9,000 people voted and over 50% of people chose Caitlyn. That's so extremely interesting because back in Season 1, Caitlyn seemed to have the most morally stable arc. One of the few characters that had priorities shifted towards one specific goal, remained that way and did not get drawn towards any means that could have been seen as morally grey, ambiguous. That changed in Season 2, at least seemingly so. And while in Season 1 I think everyone agreed with her actions, her going from not understanding Zone to seeing it through Vi's eyes, and realizing how Piltover did it dirty. In Season 2 she wasn't as cheered and her acts seemed at the very least questionable. In particular, using the grey led many people to criticizing her, with some going as far as calling her actions unforgivable. Let's have a look at that throughout all the acts of Season 2, see if the accusations are justified, if perhaps there's a line of defense one could assume. Spoiler, there is. Because as early on as Episode 1, we realized that Caitlyn was thrown right into political context of Jinx's attack aftermath, council meetings, memorials, without a single second to properly grieve her mother's loss. Not only did she have to carry the burden of her father being absolutely devastated, never to be seen again actually. Not only she had to balance her feelings for Vi and the fact Vi's sister killed her mother. Not only she became the leader of the Kiramman house, a responsibility seemingly too grand for someone her age, but also she had to carry her willingness to get revenge and balance the means she had to perform it. After all, not everyone who is driven by anger has literally possibilities to attack the entire city, because they're in charge of the police forces. So on one hand she wanted to get Jinx, and on the other she had to assess how to do it, make her reaction proportional. And within that context she was left alone, visually underlined by the song we see playing during the funeral. Everyone leaving, and forces looking back at her, not knowing how to act. Everyone except for Vi. Vi was there all along to dial down her despair-driven ambitions. Now, I did a separate video on how Caitlyn and Vi's relationship was masterfully crafted all throughout Season 2. It's a long video, so I won't be focusing too much on that particular aspect. I do want to keep Caitlyn in the spotlight. While Caitlyn was the moral compass of Season 1, focused on healing, on not abusing power. In Season 2, she did a 180 degrees turn and became someone who needed such compass herself. That compass was Vi, who tried to hold Caitlyn up to highest standards for as long as she could. For as long as Caitlyn did not push her away. Come to think of it, maybe it really is the reason why Caitlyn did it. She didn't want anyone to keep her calm, to watch her steps, to stop her from actions she wanted to perform, because despite the show she has been playing, strong leader of enforcers, she very much grieved. And she was on the edge of breakdown multiple times in Act 1, as her small gestures suggested.
I want to tear that laugh from her throat forever.
Kate.
With Caitlyn, it's always been about her gestures, her expressions. So going back to the funeral aftermath, Caitlyn had to watch her mother being taken away in a casket from her very home. She had to care for her father. She attended council meeting almost straight away and didn't cry for as long as she was seen publicly. She only cried when she stayed alone with Vi. In fact, one of her first reactions to losing her mother was saying, "I had a shot," which not only means she could have stopped Jinx, but it also means it was Vi who stopped her by saying, "It's my sister." Vi, at the moment, whether they both have seen it or not, ended up an obstacle between Kate and Jinx, and that was soon to become a problem again. Now, I don't think Caitlyn's feelings towards Vi weren't real. In fact, I think that's the one thing that remained true for Caitlyn all throughout Season 2, and Caitlyn never really blamed her for the actions of her sister. But that's a separate topic that I covered. She was also given a key to Cassandra Kiramman's private documents. Caitlyn struggled with being a successor to her mother, especially since, as she pointed out herself, she used to fight with her. The one place where she did it was by the purple petals tree, petals we have seen at the funeral, a symbol of Caitlyn's love, but also a symbol of how corrupted her feelings became with revenge as petals turned black, and with it when seeing Jinx's face. Caitlyn was literally sinking, as she told Jace, and we have seen that several times during the season when she was being choked by her opponents, which led to her protecting her neck in the final look. Her inner moral compass was disturbed by the overwhelming feeling that she has to get revenge. So, going back to the documents left behind by her mother, they included history of Piltover's approach towards the Grey, highly unstable chemical substance once before used by Piltover against Zon, as we know from Jinx Fixes Everything game. Substance Piltover vowed to never use again, that later on Caitlyn decided to utilize as a strategic weapon. The Grey developed as a result of heavy industrialization of the fissures, leading to Zonites not being able to breathe anymore. In other words, it was factory smoke that could lead to long-term health effects if exposed to it for too long, as files suggested. Eventually, Cassandra Kiramman created a ventilation system aimed to maintain it and keep it from the public. So at this point, Caitlyn found out her mother, someone who she fought with, someone she didn't think she shared too many ideals with, someone she felt misunderstood by, had things in common with her. She also at one point wanted to heal the Undercity. But Caitlyn was never to be given a chance to properly talk to her about it. We'll go back to Grey in a second. At this point, Caitlyn still seemed reasonable. She self-reflected, noticed how easy it is to hate, but she still kept these feelings under control. She realized that giving Vi the Enforcer badge was a mistake. She was able to calm down just by talking to Jace and by thinking of Vi. Now, I said in another video about this scene that since we did not get to see Vi's face in Caitlyn's head, unlike we did with Jinx and Cassandra, perhaps she was torn inside between the love for her and the fact Vi stopped her from killing Jinx back in season 1. We know that in episode 3 she once more mentioned Vi stopping her. But I also do agree with you that at this point, Vi could have been the only person that led to Caitlyn calming down her demons inside. Either way, things seem to be somewhat under control until Ambessa Medada did not start meddling, influencing Piltover politics, council decisions, in order to eventually get her hands on Hextech. She even went as far as performing the oldest trick in the book, orchestrating a Piltover attack by the Cambarans, knowing very well it's going to antagonize Piltover even more and lead to drastic measures. By using such, she was hoping to create chaos and ultimately get her hands on Hextech. Since the attack was strategically chosen, he wouldn't be outraged by disturbing a memorial. Caitlyn went from understanding how easy it is to hate someone to literally calling Zonites animals. Again, it was Vi that remained a moral compass for Caitlyn, as well as her main Zone advisor, suggesting that full-scale invasion is exactly the mistake Zone has been waiting for. To have Piltovians in their lanes, and much more strategic step would be to perform a single strike team attack aimed directly at getting Jinx, but avoiding the casualties by strictly focusing on Cambarans and not innocent people of Zone. For this purpose, Caitlyn reached out to the Grey, and watching season 2 back, it was at least partially a justified decision. But Caitlyn used it as a chemical weapon towards the poor Zonites. Well, no, I think it's hard to reach that conclusion upon rewatching everything closely. The Grey, as Smeech noticed, is basically factory smoke. Analyzing Cassandra Kiramman's files, it's clear long-term exposure to any kind of pollution really can cause harmful effects, destroy one's lungs among others. However, used strategically, in certain areas, it doesn't seem to lead to anything more serious than coughing or icky eyes. By using the Grey to clear out civilians, as Vi explained to Jinx in episode 3, Caitlyn and her team were able to target criminals while avoiding collateral damage. In fact, there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that any civilians were injured or killed by the gas. It is clear that it was used to precisely target specific areas. It was not used to flood the lanes, and Jinx, by saying so to Vi, seemed to be trying to provoke her, as we know her goal was to get attacked by her. More than that, we were shown that the Grey's respiratory effects disappear almost immediately because we've seen several characters recover quickly after they were no longer exposed to it. We have actually seen the Grey used in season 1 as well, and we're even giving an example that it's possible to become more or less immune to its effects, as Silco was able to build some sort of an immunity. While morally grey, if you will, Caitlyn did use the Enforcer's capabilities within proportional reach. It's clearly not right to use any chemical weapons. They're forbidden in war, for example. But Grey barely seemed to be a weapon. It's factory pollution that was strategically utilized to clear the streets and focus on Cambarans, as well as on fighting Jinx, while avoiding a full-scale invasion. To sum up, I don't think that using the Grey was part of Caitlyn's grandest moral crimes in season 2. It wasn't right to use that type of weapon, specifically after Piltover vowed never to use it again, if Caitlyn knew about that at all. But it was lesser of two evils, and it was used to avoid casualties. To me, Caitlyn's most atrocious act still remains the way she treated Vi in episode 3, but we'll get to that in a second. Caitlyn was determined, but also not unfair, for example towards Hinod, who really was a confessed criminal. And let's remember, while searching the lanes, they also did some good, destroyed Shimmer reserves. Now, when using the Grey, just as Jinx got away, we saw Caitlyn almost losing it again, perhaps having sort of a panic attack. All these small acts of despair we have seen rising up within her, moments when she was close to losing it, led to her final Act 1 actions, when her anger peaked.
Kate! She's a child! Move! She's not getting away again!
The moment Caitlyn shot the gun Isha was holding against Vi was the first clear signal. Of course, at this point, she did that just as Isha was about to pull the trigger. But it still makes an impact that a person being thus far so against violence, so pro-peace, willing to protect Zonites, is able to shoot a bullet towards a child. Again, it was an act of defense, but also part of the process she has been going through. And surely her actions intensified by being in the presence of Jinx for the very first time since the dinner that led to her mother's death. It's precisely this that led to her from standing over the edge to crossing it. Revenge was right in front of her, the possibility to perform it blocked by Vi. So Caitlyn raised her gun towards her to clear the path. Now we do have to underline the fact that both Vi's gauntlets, Isha's gun, even Jinx's finger from such close distance seem to be easy targets for a shooter as refined as Kate. But still, one cannot ignore taking such shots was clearly overstepping certain boundaries. In that moment, she did not give an impression of a person whose acts were predictable. The second she secured Vi, Caitlyn should have withdrawn due to Isha's presence, and her covering Jinx's body. It wasn't a shot she could have risked, due to dynamic nature of the situation, Isha tossing around. But she kept pushing forward, and Vi stopping her was clearly an impediment. At the very least, she was seen as such by Caitlyn. Because objectively speaking, Vi did nothing wrong. In fact, she remained true to her ideals and was trying to keep Kate up to the very same standards. Except Caitlyn was not seeing things clearly and couldn't handle not being able to get Jinx, her dream of revenge. She had the shot, and we know the result. The moment Vi compared Caitlyn's blind pursuit to Jinx's actions, for her it was a step too far. Being told she is similar to her mother's murderer, as well as seeing Vi as a burden, she physically pushed her away by hitting her with her gun. To me, that's the worst act that Caitlyn committed in Season 2. And she knows that. However, it's one that can still be somewhat explained by the immense amount of grief, despair dominating over Caitlyn's principles, over her righteousness. I think you could immediately see she realized what she did, the tiny second of her expression seemingly close to crying. But otherwise, she has shown no remorse in that very second. She just left. For the first time in her life, Caitlyn had no one. Her mother was dead, her father broken. Vi pushed away in what seemed to be a self-sabotage act. Jay's gone. Raisin, her initial mentor, long not there to guide her. And in that moment, Caitlyn needed to ask herself a question again, a question most quintessential to her development.
Begs the question, young Kiramman. What are you shooting for?
Caitlyn was vulnerable, and since at the very same time Ambessa conveniently so realized the Kiramman name is widely respected and pulled over, it was exactly then when using her, manipulating her became an easy task.
I owe you thanks. Your absence provided a vacuum I was able to fill.
Caitlyn assumed the role given to her by Medada, but also let's be real, she kinda put her on the spot. I mean, it would have been kind of awkward to decline in front of all the people. In the final moments of Act 1, she has been seen as a dictator by many viewers, and probably caused by visual hints of these moments. The code, very much straight out of Dictator's closet. The Noxian rhythm, the pose, dominating over Piltover. It even seemed to create an expectation to become one. But in reality, it just simply never happened. Because Caitlyn has been already past her lowest point. And ironically, from this moment on, she began to slowly heal. Somehow her look set some expectations towards a person that, even in her lowest phase, wouldn't be true to her character at all. As we saw Caitlyn again, She was so fixated on the idea of getting Jinx. But now she was doing so strategically. Instead of running around Zone using the Grey, now creating maps of potential spots where Jinx could have been. Also handling her duties as the commander, meeting Masons. It really was Ambessa responsible for all the acts of violence that she tried to hide from Caitlyn. Obviously, after the final attack on Piltover caused unwillingly by Jinx, restrictions and controls intensified. We have to remember objectively there were already 2 major attacks caused more or less by Zone in the public eye. So setting up checkpoints, doing searches, it wasn't unreasonable, but of course it caused people to disagree, because Ambessa also reached out to drastic measures. Caitlyn did not remain indifferent to that.
Was it for my encouragement that your man Rictus was instigating violence?
She wasn't a puppet that we expected her to be, following blindly Ambessa. She was not afraid to question her.
Why is peace always the justification for violence?
She did not seem to be impressed nor afraid of her. And let's remember Ambessa, is a big buffed up lady. But she was clearly trapped under her wings, as well as trapped within her own Jinx pursuit that was still going on. It's not that Caitlyn was unaware something is off, but she was still so focused on her one biggest goal. Ambessa seemed to be even aware that in order to keep her current power, she had to feed Caitlyn's urge for revenge. And that's exactly what she did, almost resembling Silco's influence over Jinx in Season 1.
But you will never rest knowing that she's out there. Or maybe I underestimated you.
Anytime Caitlyn started watching her too closely, she kept triggering Caitlyn's willingness to get Jinx. I think at this point it was also Maddie's task. We do see her helping Caitlyn out with the map, searching for possible Jinx locations, keeping her busy, making sure she doesn't get in Ambessa's way. Of course, Caitlyn will later on realize that, while discussing the situation with Vi.
She oinked poison in your ear and you just ate it. I know!
But Caitlyn wasn't a dictator everyone expected her to be by the end of Act 1. She was still just a daughter grieving her mother, trying to find revenge, trying to navigate being under Nox's influence, Medarda's traps, and measure what's best for the city she was suddenly seemingly given to control. It was a lot to handle, but there's nothing to prove at this point she was the one responsible for any acts of evil. She performed no dictator's moves. More than that, she wasn't even aware of some of the grandest acts of violence Rictus was performing, calling what Piltover did towards Zone months of peaceful occupation. Even after the Stillwater massacre caused by Warwick, she was still asking about Jinx, not realizing this by far wasn't the type of an attack Jinx would have typically done, something Season 1 Caitlyn would have instantly noticed given her perceptive and smart nature. It just didn't make sense to suspect Jinx, which only proves just how blinded Caitlyn still was. Her confrontation with Zinj also shows how still on edge she has been.
There are cells buried deep within this prison so devoid of light and fresh air and all basic human considerations that up till now, I have forbidden their use.
Threatening him to put him in a cell devoid of light. But hearing in return those in power are never innocent did seem to make an impact on her. She was slowly realizing what Ambessa is doing is out of control. She started watching her more closely. The only thing she needed was an opportunity to handle that and finally stand as her own person again. Opportunity she soon received from Vi, and we know how that went. Seeing Vi again, hearing the magical cupcake word, one with many meanings, but in this particular angle mostly reminding her who she used to be. Realizing Vi needs her help, Caitlyn did not hesitate for a second to turn her back on Ambessa, which she never fully trusted to begin with.
You don't trust me.
The blade cuts both ways.
And circumstances that followed made her confront not just Ambessa, but also one of the 3 faces that she saw anytime she closed her eyes, Jinx. Not only she was forced to cooperate with her in order to save Vander, not only she saw what Jinx really was, a daughter, very much like herself, that got her father back. She also saw how Jinx cared for Isha and how she only cared about getting Vi to safety, a priority they both by far share. We weren't directly told what Caitlyn felt in that moment, but it's clear her obsession suddenly became void. Was she to kill someone who just saved the person she loves? Was she to put her under trial? Is she the one to decide, as Vi asked?
We can't erase our mistakes. None of us.
Who decides who gets a second chance?
Does her grief provide justification? Caitlyn found an answer to these questions in her final Jinx confrontation, the ultimate act of her character's journey from searching for Jinx in Season 1 as a criminal to obsessing over her in Season 2 as her mother's murderer. Facing Jinx marked an end to that arc, as Caitlyn, seeing what she has seen, knowing what she has known, decided to forgive her and let it go. Of course, she doesn't use these words directly, but she lets go of hatred.
Hating you? I've hated myself. I just don't have the energy for it any longer.
More than that, it feels like Jinx also apologized to her indirectly, letting Caitlyn know she did not know Cassandra was inside. It does feel like, on top of other reasons, like Vi. Caitlyn also understood that if Jinx is to stand a trial, then Caitlyn, morally speaking, isn't without guilt either.
No amount of good deeds can undo our crimes!
Caitlyn has been held to higher standards, which is a mistake we make, as if we are from Piltover ourselves. We more or less expect Jinx, or Sevika, or Silco, or even Ambessa to perform actions that are severe. But when Caitlyn does it, and not even to the same degree, we judge her, we proclaim her a dictator. Even when she performed acts such as using the Grey, which could have been otherwise a full-scale invasion, she was still on spot. Admired by some, but despised by others. And I think Arcane is not about blaming someone, weighing someone's guilt. It's about redemption. It's hard to be in power. As Zinj pointed out, ones in power are hardly innocent. Neither was Caitlyn, but at least her actions usually had a justification. And as Zinj also pointed out, even unspeakable acts are usually done for love. Caitlyn's goal was end of the day not to hurt people of Zone, not even to kill Jinx, but to find some sort of justice for her mother. And it does feel like she found it in the cell where Jinx was held, where she gave her the freedom to leave, ultimately letting go of her own hatred, standing once again on Vi's side, apologizing to her for pushing her away, and giving away her political influence by leaving her seat to Sevika, thus doing what she announced that needed to be done back in Season 1, beginning the healing process.
This city needs healing. More than I ever realized.
It also very much feels like Caitlyn, by the end of her arc, finally found an answer to Grayson's question. I mean, that's really more than enough for me, but you're gonna have to find your own answer. Thank you so much for watching, really appreciate it, and major shout out to my patrons.